Hello, everybody. How y'all doing? Steven here. Well, I'm gonna try my best to explain states in Simio to you guys. Let's start off with the definition that Simio gives. States are categorized as either inherited or not. Inherited states automatically are generated with a given object. Other states are added by the user. An example of an inherited state is entity ID. Whenever an entity is created, Simio gives a unique entity ID value to each entity. And so, what if you want to make your own states? Well, you can, and these are known as non-inherent states. You can create your own states such as age, weight, and gender. You can think of states as placeholders or attributes that you want to assign to each entity so that they are unique in some way. States are pretty important in models that have entities with unique characteristics. You can create states in different levels of Simio. The first level that I'm going to discuss is the model entity level. This is the lower level, or the level where the user is looking at each individual entity. For example, let's say that we have different entities with their own unique model entity states. The model entity ID is an inherited state that is automatically assigned by Simio, and the weight is a non-inherited state created by the user. Simio is not going to know that your model wants to look at the weight of each entity, so you have to create this state and assign the value yourself. Try to imagine that each entity has a badge pinned on the shirts with their unique traits such as their model entity ID, which was assigned by the Simio, or weight, which you wrote on their badge yourself. These unique states are created on the model entity level. The next level is the model level. This is also known as the higher or global level. Try imagining an overhead view of all the entities. From this perspective, you can probably count how many entities there are, but you don't have the point of view where you can see their badge that shows their unique characteristics. So imagine that these entities are exiting to a sink, and you want to accumulate the weight of the entities that exit the sink. You can do this by assigning a state in the model level and sum the weight of the entities that exit the system. And so this is also known as the model state. And now I'm going to give you a system where we can model with states.
Hey everybody, Steven here, and I'm at my dad's store in Chinatown, and I think I'm gonna use my dad's store as a system that we can model. So, we have customers coming in at different in arrival times, and one of the unique things about each and every customer is that they, buy a lot of different things, so at the end, they are gonna have different purchase amounts. So that's something I want you guys to model. So the example is, let's say the in arrival rate of customers coming into the store is about 5 minutes with an exponential distribution. And the purchase amount is at the range, let's say between $1 and $10 with a uniform distribution. So how would you guys model that?
Alright guys, so I just opened Simio and let's get started. Let's model my dad's store. So I opened a new project. I haven't done anything to it yet except adding this floor label here just to help us with inputting the information into our model. So as you can see here on the right hand side, you can see that right now we're in the model level, and you notice there's a part that says model entity. That's the model entity level, just like I described before. I'll get more into that a little bit later in this tutorial, but first let's start setting up the system. So first of all, we have the source where the customers are coming in. Then we have the server where they are being processed, and then the sink. So let's add some paths and connect these components. So next, let's add in the model entity, and let's just rename this to customer. And just to make sure that this source is, creating the right entity, we'll click the source and give it, assign it to create the customer entity. So now this is the simple, the simple system. So we have an inner arrival rate of 5 minutes with an exponential distribution. So let's change that real quick. Okay, to 5, and let's make sure that this is just it's in minutes. Yes, so it's in minutes. Now we want to assign a purchase amount with a uniform distribution from the range of 1 to 10. But how are we going to do that? So this is where states come in, and this is where they are usually used. So whenever you want to assign a unique uh, attribute or like a value to each and every model entity, then you would have to create a state assignment in the model entity level. So let's do that. So as I said before, we are in the model level, and now we need to get into the model entity. So simply click model entity and definitions, and then states. So this is where we are going to create our model entity state. So as you can see, there are different types of states we can create. There's the real, there's integers, boolean, etc., etc. Since it's a uniform distribution, there could be decimals. So let's use a real number. So as you can see there, a real state variable just popped up. And so let's rename this to purchase amount. Okay, so now we have a model entity state called purchase amount. So right now in Simio, by default, once you create a state assignment, the automatic default is usually 0. So we need to give that uniform 1 through 10 value in the model somewhere. So we have to go back in the model. So here in the model, where would it make sense to assign that purchase amount value to the customer? So for example, let's say the customer comes in, they look at stuff, items to purchase, and just as before they enter, let's say this server one is the cashier. Let's name this real quick to, let's rename this to cashier. So right before the customer enters, enters and talks to the cashier, they've already, gathered all their items, and that's when I believe would be a good spot to assign a purchase amount to the customer entity. So the way we assign the value to the state is by basically clicking the component where you want to assign the value. So we want to assign it right before the cashier. So we would click cashier, and to the right we would expand the state assignments. So we have two options for this server. We have on entering or before exiting. And like I said before, we want to assign this value right before they enter the cashier. So on entering. So click on this little icon here on the right. And now we're going to add. So we're going to add, we're going to try to add a value. So the state variable that we want to give a value to is the purchase amount, specifically the model entity purchase amount. And remember, it's model entity, not just model entity, because it's unique to each and every entity. And the new value we want to assign to this entity is random.uniform 1 through 10. Okay. So after you finish typing that in, you can just hit close. So what I just did is, so if we hit play, this source would create a customer entity. That customer would come in, and just as soon as the customer enters the cashier, that customer entity is assigned a purchase amount with the uniform distribution. So they're not assigned once they are created. They are assigned, right before they enter the cashier server.